Hello, I'm Rebecca Flaherty, and this week I'm going to be showing you how to use this trailing floral template to make this pattern here. This template is the last one in the series. It's part of a set of 6 which you can find in my Etsy store, but if you want to test the concept out first, you can get this template for free from my Pattern Maker's Toolkit, and then follow along with that one, swapping in the colours and flower shapes we're using here today. For accessibility, this video has got fully edited subtitles, and I've also put in timestamps, so if you're a regular here and want to skip ahead to the beginning of the tutorial, you can do that now. This is a more advanced level tutorial, so if you've never made a pattern using the diamond method in Procreate before, then you should check out this video first because it covers everything in much more detail and at a slower pace than I'm going to be going today. I've also got lots of beginner friendly pattern tutorials on my channel which will help you get started with the way I make pattern repeats in Procreate. This next part is very important. You may be used to dragging and dropping files into Procreate, but if you do it with PSD files, it will flatten all the layers, so be sure to import it the way I'm about to show you. Also, yes, the thumbnails are white and look empty, but I'll explain why in a second. So let's get started here today. I'm going to bring in the canvas, so we're in our gallery screen, and we're going to tap on import, and we're going to bring in this last canvas here, canvas 6. All of the thumbnails there are white. That's because saving these out with just the white background showing helps to keep the file size down. You just need to, when you open the file up, turn the sketch layers on and everything is in there. For some reason, saving it with just the white showing makes for a smaller file size, and it means I can upload all the files in one zip file to Etsy rather than having to have multiple downloads or putting it on a PDF so that you have a separate link for it. So yeah, don't panic, they're all there. Just open the file up and turn the sketch layers on when you open it. This is perhaps the most complicated pattern in this series, which is why I've left this one till last. There's going to be some leaves here which overlap the rest, and those are the red ones, and we'll be drawing those on separate layers. We'll come to all that later, but basically when we make the pattern, we're going to draw all the motifs that you can see here in black, and then the ones in blue are going to be made by transforming those around the outside. So we're going to start off by drawing in our sketch layer. This is made up of this template here on one layer, and then on another layer I've got this sketch diamond. If you're following along using the free template, on a layer above your free template that you've opened up, you just need to add a layer above it, and on an empty layer just draw in a rough diamond that goes all the way off the canvas edges on all 4 sides. It doesn't have to be perfect, this one definitely isn't, it just needs to go all the way off the edges. I'm going to delete this one because we have this perfect one set up already for us to use, and I'm going to start on an empty layer above that diamond. This will allow me to move things around without having to mess up the edges of the diamond if I want to rotate things or move them around. You can also just draw over the top of the diamond, and we will be merging it later, but it just makes sense to make use of being able to move stuff around without messing it before we merge it. So I'm going to use these flower stamps that come with the trailing floral set. You can use other floral stamps, you can freehand them, you don't have to use stamps in your sketch layer. I just like doing it because it saves time. I'm going to use this daisy here and stamp this into each of these big black circles. Use this orange colour, and I'm in an empty layer above the sketch diamond. So then I'll stamp one of these in each of these black circles. Just the black ones, the blue ones will be made by repeating these later. And then in these smaller black circles I'm going to do some buds, and we'll use this one here for that. So I'm going to stamp them on the same layer and use the select tool, turn snapping and magnetics off, and I'm just going to use this to position them in the spaces marked out by the smaller black circles there. So now that all of the flower shapes are in place, I'm going to merge that down with the sketch diamond, and then we're going to build these out around the outside now. So we'll duplicate this layer, tap to transform, and we need to put snapping and magnetics back on, and I've got them turned all the way up. And we're going to drag this down and snap it into this corner. Duplicate that bottom layer again and drag it up and over into this corner. And then duplicate again, drag it up and over into that corner, each time looking to make sure you've got those orange lines there so that you know it's snapping exactly into place. Then these top 4 layers, we can pinch those together, and they're the ones that are now around the outside, and I'm going to invert the colours on those so that we can see which ones are which. So everything is in place now for our sketch, we just need to trace over these. If you wanted to make any changes to the layout of the leaves or the stems, then I would also trace those onto your sketch diamond layer and then transform that so you can make sure everything's lining up. But I'm going to stick to just what's here, so I'm going to go ahead and freehand those in the pattern section. So I'm going to turn on my pattern layer and I'm going to add a layer above this pattern marker, and the first layer that we need to draw is this stem in green dotted line that goes over there, because that one comes down here and then matches up with itself again further down here. So this green one is the first one we need to put in place. I'm going to use my tracing crayon and I'm going to turn up the stabilization on this one. And I'm going to follow the green dotted line as closely as I can down to here. And if I take it to just behind this leaf here, it will eventually be covered up by that, so we don't have to worry too much about making them match and merge together. And also, because it goes behind this flower here, you can actually zoom in a bit more and stop halfway behind this if you want to. Sometimes it's difficult to draw a smooth line when you're zoomed that far out. So we can zoom in a bit further here. So we get to stop halfway and then we can just come from here down to behind this leaf. Once we have this line in place, we need to transform and duplicate it down here so we can see where to merge this one in, and also up here so we can draw the rest of this line in. So to do that, we're going to draw a line going off the corners of this shape. It needs to go all the way off those edges so that we can grab the whole canvas. When we duplicate and tap to transform, this will grab the whole canvas, not just the line in the middle. So we're going to drag one down here and snap it into this corner, the same as we did when we were transforming the sketch. And you can see we've now got that line in place, so when we draw this, we know what we're merging it in with. And then we duplicate that bottom layer again, and we'll take this up into that corner so we've got it starting there. I'll pinch these two together and just bring down the opacity on those a bit so that we know which one's which. And then going back down to the layer that has this on it, we can then put those extra lines in place now. So we'll start with this one. So as I said, merging those bits together doesn't matter too much because they're going to be hidden behind that leaf. And then this one here, start the curve for that flower up there. Bring that down and merge that in with that flower down there. Now we're done with that top one, so we can get rid of that one and carry on tracing all the rest of these stems in place now, just the ones that have the black dotted lines on them. When you come to these red ones, if you want those to have a leaf vein on them like this, these red ones are going to be placed above the stems that we're drawing on this layer. So whilst you're drawing on this layer, leave out any leaf veins that will be for red leaves and put them in afterwards on a layer above. When you get to this section here, you're going to need to duplicate this again so you can bring this bit down to there and merge this part in with it. So duplicate this layer, tap to transform, snap this down into that corner, and then on making sure you're on the bottom layer, you can then carry on drawing the rest of this in there and merge it in with there like that. So once you've done all of the stems in for the black leaves, add a layer above. You can get rid of this one on top and then put in the leaf veins for all of the leaves shown in red now. So all of the ones for the red leaves should be on a separate layer above. And now we're ready to draw our leaves in. So I'm going to add those underneath the main stems, and we'll draw in the ones that are black here. The red ones we'll draw on top of these main stems. So we're just going to draw the black ones in underneath. I'm going to use this blue colour to do it, and I'm going to use classic teardrop shape for these. So now I've got all of the black leaf shapes drawn in. I'm going to fill those using colour drop. So now we've got all of these colour filled, we need to go and fix this halo. So we're going to duplicate this layer, go to our adjustments, go to Gaussian blur and put a Gaussian blur of 3% on there. Then we can hide the blurred layer, and on the blurred layer, tap to select, choose automatic and tap outside of our area here. adjust the threshold so that it comes in past the edges of the leaf, but not so that it goes past the line that we want to fill. Then we can invert the selection, and as you can see, we've got an area inside the edge of the shape selected. So now we can add a new layer, tap and fill the layer, and that's going to add a smaller area of colour on that layer that will fit nicely inside those and cover up that gap there. So then we can delete the layer in the middle and pinch those two together. So now we can add the red leaves. So add those above your stems. So add a layer there and then repeat that and draw these leaves in as well. And you'll see they go over and above. So then once you've got all of your leaf shapes in, we can move on and we can start illustrating the flowers. So I'm going to add a layer in at the top here, and we'll start with the daisy buds, I think. I'm going to do those in the same colour as I use for the stems. So it will kind of look like it's all part of the same thing. And I'm just going to draw these shapes in like that, merging them in with the stem there. So all of those bud shapes are now filled, and on a layer underneath I'm going to add the first set of petals. I'm going to do these in white, so let's change the background colour to pink. So then on this layer underneath these, I'll draw these two petals here first. I later merge all of the petals onto one layer and decide to have them all white with no separation, so you can trace over all three here if you want to. I'm going to make sure I close the shape up underneath so that when I colour fill, it doesn't spill out. And then on a layer underneath, we'll add the other petal in. And then we can do the daisy petals. So we'll add a new layer in somewhere above the stem layers. And again, with our white, we can just trace these in like this. And then we can have a go at filling these edge gaps. So just duplicate this. Gaussian blur 3%. Hide this layer. Tap and select. Adjust your threshold. Invert. And then add a layer above and fill. Delete the middle layer, and then we can go in and erase bits where this threshold has brought it up further than this is supposed to go. So I guess if I bring the opacity down on this layer, I can see underneath which bits I can erase. So let's do it that way. So we'll just erase back those bits to put that definition back in there. So yeah, this way of filling the shapes is not perfect and it's not foolproof, but erasing these few bits off this layer is a lot quicker than going around and tracing over all those lines for the whole of the flower. So I think I'd still rather do it this way than trace around the edges. And then before you merge this down again, don't forget to turn the opacity back up on this. So then you can merge those two together. So now I'm going to bring the sketch folder up on top of here so I can do the line work. So I'll turn the opacity down on this and turn the template off. Before we do the line work though, I need to draw in these middle bits for the flowers, which I forgot to do. So let's add those in on a layer above the white petals. So now I've got these all coloured in, I'm going to alpha lock the layer and I'm going to change the colour of some of these to something a bit more funky. So now we're ready to start adding some line work to this. So let's start on the flower petals. This layer here, which has this on, I'm going to change the blend mode on that to linear burn so we can see it over this orange stuff. So let's do these daisies first. Let's add a layer above those, grab my line details brush, and I'm going to use the same colour for each one of these to do the line work, I think. And then we'll use the mini dot brush to add these dots on there. And then each one of these will do in the same colour as the flower centre. So that's all the line work on the big daisy petals. Now we can put some in on the smaller ones. So let's add that above the smaller ones. And again, I'm going to use a mix of colours to do this. How many have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I can do 2 in each colour. So let's spread the colours out a bit. So we'll do this one pink as well. And then last of all, these dots around here, I can't decide whether to do those white or to use a colour burn or colour dodge layer for those. So we'll do them in white to start with. So we'll add a layer above those. Grab white. And we'll start off making them white and then do a bit of experimenting and see what we end up with. Might do one in the middle as well. I think I'm going to do a bigger dot of each of those in the middle, just because I think that will look cute. There we go. So now we can turn our sketch layer off, or our sketch group off, and I think I'm going to leave it white. And also, now I'm looking at this, I'm thinking maybe I will just leave that white as well. So that background leaf layer, I think I'm going to go back to having that white. I'm not going to do any shading and texture on here, but I am going to put a little bit of shading just behind where there's things overlapping. So I'll turn my sketch back on again, and I want the template layer on for this, but we'll bring the opacity down on that. So where I've got something coming out from underneath something else on this bottom stem layer, I'll add a layer above and we'll make it a clipping mask. I'll adjust the opacity in a bit when I can see how it's going to look. And I'm going to grab a softer shading brush, so we'll use the shading crayon and this grey colour. So on these stems where they come out from behind the leaves, sorry, the petals, I'm going to put a bit of darker colour on there, and also here where it comes out from behind these leaves that are overlapping. And here we know this bit is going to be under these leaves, so we can put some here as well. We've got the template to show us where these leaves are going to be coming over. Also here we can put some where there's going to be a leaf overlapping it there. These leaves here, this stem here, and also this leaf here we could add some too. So that's going to be one of the lower leaves, so we can add a layer above the lower leaves, make that a clipping mask, and make the blend mode of this colour burn as well. Just add a little bit of soft shading under that. We will want to turn the opacity down on that though, make that 40%. Go back up to the layer that's above our stems. Some on here. Some on there, but I don't want it to spill on this bit here, so I'm going to just go and erase that bit. It's gone on there. I think that's all of those done. Turn the sketch layer off so I can see a bit easier, and I think I will turn the blend mode opacity down a little bit. That was a little bit too dark there. Maybe take it to 60%. And there we go. Now we're ready to build out the pattern tile. So I'm going to hide this one here, turn off the background colour, close this group, and we'll swipe down with 3 fingers to copy all. Then we'll paste that in again up at the top, hide our pattern group and turn the background colour back on. So now we can duplicate this layer, tap to transform and drag it into each of the corners here, making sure it's snapping into place each time. And then in terms of layer order in this pattern, the places to look for are up here. You want to make sure that this one here is underneath your main pattern group, so we'll drag that to the bottom. And then you need to make sure that you've got this group here, this bottom corner, above your main pattern group, so that one's okay. But if this one was underneath there, you'd have the same problem up there. So you need to make sure, check here and up here to make sure everything's in the right place. The other place you need to watch out is here. So this part here, that also needs to be dragged down underneath your pattern group there. So then we can erase the marks there and on this one. Then we'll turn that one back on and I can erase them off the corners as well. And then that should be everything. Before we merge this and move on and test the repeat, I've just got one more thing I want to do, which is just to add some little dotty shapes in here to fill the spaces. So I'm going to turn my pattern layer back on, and in my sketch layer I'm just going to have the sketch diamond, the spare diamond, turned on there. So now I can see all of the pattern laid out where everything is, and I can see the diamond. So in my pattern group here, I'll add a layer. From the floral set, I'm going to grab this little white flower brush here. I'm just going to stamp a few of these little flowers into the spaces around here like this. This is a bit that's always nice to leave until the end, because then you know exactly what space you're working with. And I'm not going to do one there because I can see I've already got a version of that down there. So we won't put one in there. So I'm going to leave this one in my pattern group so that it's there, duplicate it, and then bring it up here to underneath the ones I've duplicated up there. I can turn all of these underneath off now. And on this flower layer, I'm just going to put that mark off the corners again, and then I'm going to duplicate this around the canvas. There we go, then I can pinch the top four together, erase the marks in the middle there, and then on the bottom layer, erase the marks that I drew in the corner there. And then I can merge all of this together into one layer, and then that is now a finished pattern tile. Before we save and export, I'm going to put it into repeat and check that there's no gaps in there. So to do that, we're going to swipe down to copy all, then swipe down again and tap paste. Then underneath this, I'm going to add a layer, and I'll fill it with a dark colour, so that if there's any gaps in the pattern, that dark colour will show through. So let's tap to transform this, snap it up to halfway there, 1800 pixels, duplicate, tap to transform, snap it over to here, and we can zoom in and check that seam down the middle there. And that's looking okay. Pinch those two together, duplicate, and drag that down to the bottom there. And again, just check along that seam there to make sure that looks okay as well. We can pinch those together, and that is our pattern in repeat. So that is the last pattern in this trailing floral set, all complete now. You can find this set of 6 templates over in my Etsy store, as well as the original Pattern Maker canvas and brush set, which has all the drawing brushes I've used today. If you're a Pattern Maker's Toolkit member, you'll get 10% off everything in my Etsy store. The Pattern Maker's Toolkit is kind of like a Patreon group, except it's free. You get access to all the resources in the Pattern Maker's Toolkit on my website, including those I make for my Skillshare classes, early access to some of my YouTube tutorials and drawing prompts, discounts in my Etsy store, and one new freebie exclusively via email every month. All the links for those are in the description. And don't forget to subscribe here if you want to see more pattern tutorials like this every week. That's all from me today. Have fun, stay creative, and I will see you soon.